There is a number that every American admiral in the Persian Gulf woke up thinking about this morning. That number is 3.3, not a percentage, not a temperature, not an enrichment level. It is a speed, 3.3 times the speed of sound. And as of today, that number is the single most strategically important figure in the entire Iran crisis. Today, Reuters published a bombshell report sourced to 6 separate individuals with direct knowledge of ongoing negotiations. 3 officials briefed by the Iranian government and 3 security officials familiar with the talks. Their collective testimony describes a weapons deal that, if completed, will fundamentally rewrite the naval mathematics of any American military operation against Iran. Iran is close to reaching a deal with China to purchase advanced anti-ship cruise missiles. According to 6 people with knowledge of the negotiations, as the United States deploys a large naval force near Iran amid escalating tensions. The agreement for the Chinese-made CM-302 missiles is nearing completion, though no delivery date has been set. The CM-302. Remember that designation, because you're going to hear it in every serious defense briefing, every naval war game, and every classified threat assessment for the next decade. This is not an upgraded version of an old Iranian missile. This is not a domestically produced weapon from a country operating under severe sanctions. This is China's most advanced export-grade anti-ship cruise missile, designed, manufactured, and battle-tested by the same state aerospace corporation that has been building the weapon systems that keep American carriers out of the South China Sea. The CM-302's export range is roughly 290 kilometers. The weapon carries a 250 kilo class warhead and approaches targets in a sea-skimming profile with terminal maneuvering intended to break fire control solutions and stress close-in defenses. In practical naval terms, the combination of supersonic speed and low altitude reduces the defender's engagement window, forcing earlier detection, faster track quality generation, and rapid layered engagements, break fire control solutions. That phrase, from Army Recognition's technical analysis, is the engineering description of what this missile does to an Aegis-equipped destroyer in plain military language. It does not just approach fast. It maneuvers at 3.3 times the speed of sound in the final seconds of its flight, specifically to break the targeting lock that the ship's defense computer has been calculating since the missile was first detected. The ship's computer has been building a predictive model of where the missile will be in 4 seconds. The missile changes direction. The model is wrong. The ship has to start over. And at 3.3 Mach, there is no time to start over. China's state-owned China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation markets the CM-302 as the world's best anti-ship missile capable of sinking an aircraft carrier or destroyer. The weapon system can be mounted on ships, aircraft, or mobile ground vehicles. It can also take out targets on land. Ships, aircraft, mobile ground vehicles, land targets. And that versatility is the second dimension of what this deal represents. Iran does not need a fleet of warships to launch CM-302 missiles. It needs trucks. It needs mobile launchers that can be dispersed across coastal terrain, hidden behind hills and in valleys, driven to a launch position, fired, and relocated before American aircraft can respond. The same geography that makes Iran's territory so difficult to bomb comprehensively. The Zagros Mountains, the Elburz Range, the thousands of square kilometers of desert and coastline that would require thousands of American targets to systematically neutralize, is the geography inside which mobile CM-302 launchers would operate. Invisible before launch, lethal at launch, gone after launch. Danny Citrinowicz, a former Israeli intelligence officer and senior researcher on Iran at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv, said, "It's a complete game changer if Iran has supersonic capability to attack ships in the area. These missiles are very difficult to intercept. A complete game changer." Those are the words of a former Israeli intelligence officer whose entire professional life has been spent analyzing Iranian military capability, a man who has every professional and national interest in minimizing rather than amplifying the threat. When that man calls a single weapons deal a complete game changer, the word is not being used for dramatic effect. It is a technical assessment from someone who has spent years calculating exactly what Iran can and cannot do to Israeli and American naval forces. And today, 6 sources told Reuters that deal is nearly complete. The USS Abraham Lincoln is in the Arabian Sea. The USS Gerald R. Ford is approaching from the Mediterranean. Together, those 2 carrier strike groups represent the most concentrated display of American naval power since the Gulf War. They carry 150 aircraft, 5,000 personnel, and enough firepower to execute the sustained, weeks-long attritional campaign the Pentagon has been planning. And they are now within 290 kilometers of a coastline that, if this deal closes, will be able to fire back at them with weapons that their defense systems cannot reliably stop. Stay with me, because the physics of what the CM-302 does to American naval defenses and why China chose this exact moment to push this deal to completion is the story behind the story. To understand why the CM302 deal is not just a weapons sale, but a strategic earthquake, you need to understand the specific vulnerability it is designed to exploit, and why that vulnerability exists in the American naval architecture that has dominated global oceans for 80 years. The United States Navy's primary defense against anti-ship missiles is the Aegis combat system, a networked radar and weapons platform installed on destroyers and cruisers that can simultaneously track hundreds of airborne threats and engage multiple targets with SM-2 and SM-6 interceptor missiles. Aegis is extraordinary technology. It has been refined over 40 years. It is, in many scenarios, the most capable naval air defense system ever built. But Aegis was designed and optimized in an era when anti-ship missiles were primarily subsonic. The physics of defending against a subsonic missile, flying at 0.8 to 0.9 Mach, gives a defending ship between 90 seconds and 3 minutes of engagement time after the missile is detected at the edge of its radar horizon. 90 seconds is enough time for Aegis to calculate an intercept solution, confirm the track, launch an interceptor, and assess the outcome. 90 seconds is workable. A likely tactical model is a blended strike, subsonic missiles and drones forcing radar workload and ammunition expenditure, followed by supersonic sea skimmers that arrive with minimal warning at the terminal stage. Even advanced Aegis-equipped ships can be stressed when forced to manage dense tracks at short timelines, especially if threats approach from multiple bearings and altitudes. In the Gulf's constrained waters, geography further favors the attacker. Coastal launch sites, islands, and civilian traffic can complicate discrimination and allow launch units to shoot and relocate from concealed positions. The blended strike, that is the tactical doctrine the CM302 enables, and it is the doctrine that makes the engagement window problem catastrophic rather than merely difficult. Iran already possesses thousands of subsonic drones and cruise missiles. It can launch those first, forcing every Aegis radar on every destroyer in the strike group to build tracks and evaluate threats simultaneously. It can force every CIWS point defense gun to begin cycling. It can force the combat information centers on those ships to prioritize, assign interceptors, and make engagement decisions at a rate that pushes human operators toward their cognitive limits. And then, while the radars are saturated and the interceptors are being allocated and the operators are managing the workload, the CM302 arrives at 3.3 Mach sea skimming, maneuvering in the terminal phase, with a reaction window measured not in minutes, but in seconds. The CM302 purchase would be a significant improvement in an Iranian arsenal depleted by last year's war, said Peter Weisman, a senior researcher at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Depleted by last year's war. That detail matters enormously. Iran fired 574 missiles during the June 2025 12-day conflict. It launched drone swarms. It used up significant portions of its most capable munitions against Israeli and American defenses. The CM302 deal is not just about adding a new capability. It is about rebuilding a depleted arsenal with something qualitatively superior to what was lost. Iran entered the June 2025 conflict with large numbers of Shahab and Ahmad ballistic missiles and Shahed cruise missiles. It would potentially exit a new conflict with supersonic sea skimmers that can hold American carriers at risk in ways that Iran's pre-existing inventory simply could not. Now look at China's calculation, because China is not doing this out of friendship, and understanding what Beijing actually wants from this moment is essential to understanding what comes next. China does not want to see a pro-Western regime in Iran. That would be a threat to their interests. They are hoping that this regime will stay. A pro-Western regime in Tehran would be China's strategic nightmare. Iran supplies roughly 10% of China's oil imports. Iran provides China with a land route through which to project economic and political influence across the Middle East. Iran is the anchor of China's vision for the Belt and Road Corridor through Central Asia and the Persian Gulf. If the Islamic Republic falls and is replaced by a government aligned with Washington, the Pahlavi scenario Trump's envoy has been quietly promoting, China loses its most important strategic partner in the region and gains an American ally on its energy supply chain. Trump warned that Chinese military support for Iran, particularly the transfer of advanced weapon systems, would jeopardize the relationship between the two leaders and could affect ongoing trade discussions ahead of his planned visit to Beijing in April. Trump's planned April visit to Beijing, trade discussions. Those two facts, sitting alongside the CM302 deal, tell you that China is not deterred by American warnings. China is calibrating. It is providing just enough support to Iran to ensure the Islamic Republic can survive a military confrontation, without providing so much that it triggers a direct American response against Chinese interests. The CM302 deal is China's insurance policy on its most important Middle Eastern strategic partner, timed to land in the public domain at the exact moment American carriers are entering Iranian strike range. That timing is not coincidence. It is a message. There's a scene playing out right now in the South China Sea that nobody covering the Iran crisis is connecting to the CM302 deal. And connecting those two things is the key to understanding what China is actually doing and why it matters far beyond the Persian Gulf. For the past decade, China's military strategy in the Pacific has been built on a concept called anti-access area denial, A2AD in Pentagon planning language. The core idea is simple. You do not need to defeat the American Navy in a direct battle. You need to make American carriers too expensive to operate within effective range of the Chinese coast. You need to hold them at risk. You need to force American commanders to keep their most valuable assets far enough from Chinese shores that their aircraft cannot reach Chinese territory without running out of fuel or without flying through zones covered by Chinese anti-ship missiles. China began developing the YJ-12 class in the 1990s and fielded it in later decades as an air-launched and ship-launched anti-ship cruise missile emphasizing high speed and terminal penetration. Export variants like CM302 offer partners a shortcut to mature propulsion and guidance packages that are difficult to replicate quickly under sanctions pressure. A shortcut to mature propulsion and guidance packages. That phrase describes exactly what China is giving Iran, and exactly what Iran's domestic missile program cannot produce quickly on its own under sanctions. Iran has brilliant engineers. It has built its ballistic missile program largely from scratch under conditions of severe international isolation. But the propulsion technology and multispectral guidance systems that make the CM302 fly at 3.3 Mach and maneuver in its terminal phase are the product of decades of Chinese aerospace research that Iran cannot replicate in the time frame that matters. By transferring that technology to Iran now, at the moment of maximum tension, with American carriers entering the Gulf, China is simultaneously doing several things at once. It is protecting its oil supply. It is defending its A2AD doctrine by battle testing the weapons family in a real conflict environment. It is demonstrating to every American adversary from Tehran to Pyongyang to Moscow that Chinese military technology transfers are real, functional, and available to partners willing to stand up to Washington. And it is giving American naval planners a data point about how Aegis defenses perform against CM302 class weapons. Data that will flow directly back to Chinese military analysts preparing for the South China Sea scenario that keeps American Pacific commanders awake at night. Iran is also in discussions to acquire Chinese surface-to-air missile systems, so-called manpads, anti-ballistic weapons, and anti-satellite weapons, That capability, barely mentioned in the Reuters report, buried after the CM302 headline, is potentially the most consequential of all. American military operations in the 21st century depend on satellite communications for everything. GPS targeting for precision munitions, reconnaissance satellite feeds for real-time battle damage assessment, communications, satellites linking carrier strike groups to command authority in the continental United States, and early warning satellites that give American commanders the minutes they need to respond to missile launches. An Iranian anti-satellite capability, Chinese supplied, tested in the conditions of an actual conflict, would threaten not just the Iran campaign, but America's entire global command and control architecture. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei last week appeared to threaten U.S. warships directly, writing, "More dangerous than that warship is the weapon that can send that warship to the bottom of the sea. More dangerous than that warship." Khamenei wrote that on February 17th, 1 week before Reuters revealed the CM302 deal. He was not speaking abstractly. He was not making a general statement about Iranian military capability. He was referencing a specific conversation, a specific weapon, a specific deal that was already in its final stages when he typed those words. He knew what was coming. He was telling the world to pay attention. The USS Gerald R. Ford was photographed docked at Suda Bay in Crete on February 24th, today, on its way toward the Persian Gulf. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already in the Arabian Sea. Their combined strike capability, their 150 aircraft, their thousands of sailors, all of it is now within the operational envelope of a weapon that, as of today, 6 sources have confirmed is weeks away from landing in Iranian hands. The Geneva talks are Thursday. The Iranian nuclear proposal is expected any day. Trump's extended deadline is running, and China has chosen this specific week, with the carriers moving, the deadline ticking, the diplomatic window narrowing, to let the world know that Iran will not be walking into this confrontation alone or unarmed. A complete game changer. That was the judgment of a former Israeli intelligence officer about what the CM302 means for anyone who parks a carrier in the Persian Gulf. Today, that game changer stopped being a negotiating rumor and became a Reuters headline sourced to 6 people who know exactly what they are talking about. Share this video right now, because the weapon that changes the naval mathematics of this entire crisis just became public knowledge, and the carriers heading toward Iran are now sailing toward a coastline that is getting more dangerous by the hour.